Hey, what's going on, everybody? David Noe with Speakeasy HR, presented by Payroll Partners. We are back at it with a brand new episode after the holiday that we just went through, and now we're in the thick of the holiday season. So, my name is David Noe. I'm the host, producer, and editor of Speakeasy HR, and I have somebody on today as a really good, really awesome treat for everybody who is here to think and learn a little bit more about visual thinking and leadership. So I'm thrilled to have on Speakeasy HR Todd Cherches. Welcome, Todd. How are you today, my friend?
David, great to be with you today. And yeah, I always love your show. We have to give a shout out to our friend Peter Phelan, the culture doctor and
Yeah,
recruiter to the stars, who introduced us. So thanks to Peter for that.
absolutely. Really fun guest I had on over the summer with Peter. So definitely have more stories like that where people I have on, they come on and they have a good time with Speakeasy HR and they connect me to new people. So I have a whole lot planned out for the next almost year. So I'm very blessed and honored to have so many fun guests on, and for people watching live to learn with me, learn with the guest and everybody that we have on. So Todd, if you want to just kind of start, tell us a little bit about your background. You are in education. You are an author of a very awesome visual leadership book, and it's very heavy.
Ah,
I was telling Todd before we came on, it's very heavy. The pictures in here are colorful. So obviously, we'll get more into this book. So Todd, if you want to start, just explain your background and kind of where you got to where you are now, and we'll go from there.
sure. Well, I talk about it in the opening of my TED Talk called The Power of Visual Thinking. I tell the story about how when I was a kid, people would say, Todd, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would say, Superman. And they'd be like, oh, that's great, because I was like 5 years old at the time. And they say, well, what if you couldn't be Superman? What's your next choice? And I said, Batman. So those were my two career aspirations from a young age.
There you go.
But as a kid of that generation, hooked on television, I knew I wanted to do something in television. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know what the jobs were. Watching Bewitched, I saw like advertising, like so you picked up on things just from television, and but so something in advertising, television, something creative always resonated with me. So I have a bachelor's degree in English literature with a concentration in Shakespeare and poetry, and then I majored in communications. I got my master's in communication in college. Everything geared towards working in the TV industry. And my first job out of college was at Ogilvy and Mather Advertising in New York. And I really wanted a creative job. In fact, I'm just now rewatching the show Mad Men, which I had seen a long time ago, but my wife and I went back to the beginning. And so there's something about the advertising industry, the creativity. And I wanted to either be like a creative exec or an account exec, but the only job I could get was in the media buying group. And it was very much a numbers job. So while it was exciting to be at a classic ad agency like Ogilvy and Mather, I'm talking about an elevator pitch. I once got into an elevator and David Ogilvy, the master of advertising, got into the elevator with me. I was so terrified. I didn't speak to him. He didn't speak to me, and I regret that to this day. But a year at Ogilvy and Mather gave me like a foundation in work. But then I realized if I wanted to work in television, I had to be on the West Coast. And you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from New York, so I'm not going to hide it. Um, so I talk fast and loud, even though I'm an extreme introvert. That's a separate topic. But I moved out to LA and I got a number of part-time jobs in the TV industry. I worked for Aaron Spelling on Dynasty, putting scripts together. I worked in casting at Columbia Pictures. I worked in comedy at Disney. I worked in drama program development at CBS. So I really did eventually get into television, but always as like an administrative assistant type of level. I just couldn't crack that ceiling to get to the next level for a manager job. Mainly because I was really, again, really introverted. And one of the things I learned was that I always thought that your work speaks for itself, but then I learned the hard way that you have to speak for your work. And I teach that to my students and my clients. So that's one of the reasons I didn't really advance in that industry, because I didn't promote myself well enough, because I didn't have the confidence or the skills to do that at that time. But you live and learn, and I teach that. That's why I'm an executive coach and a professor. I teach people what I didn't know when I was their age. So I'll stop right there for a second.
There you go.
That's my background in advertising,
Yeah.
television. I worked in the theme park business as a project manager. And then after 10 years in LA, I moved back to New York, and I eventually just happened to end up in management leadership development. But I'll stop right there. So
Wow.
that's the early part of my career.
Wow. So all of that, is there any story that sticks out to you that just is one of your favorites? Maybe it's somebody you worked with, somebody that just became you had a different perception of them. after working with them, or is there any story that sticks out to you in all those jobs?
Yeah, the first one that jumped out to me is my. It's a chapter of my book called "A Love Letter to Horrible Bosses Everywhere," and the main theme in my career up until that point was that I had one horrible boss after another, like abusive, tyrannical, just really. So when I interview that, I won't say which TV network, but it has a C, a B, and an S in its name. But I'm not going to say anything more than that. But I interviewed at this TV network, and the woman who interviewed me, I got home and I said to my roommate, I don't know if I met my wife or my boss, but this was one of the greatest interviews of my life. She hired me, and then 1 week in, my life became a living hell. It was just the worst experience of my life. She was just a horrible boss. Again, so that's the one that most stands out. And I always say sometimes you learn more from your bad experiences than from your
Oh
good
yeah.
experiences. So that
Yep.
lingers with me. It taught me how not to manage and lead people. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest experience that stood out for me. Just because most people are thrown into jobs and told to be a manager or a boss, but most people don't receive any training or coaching in how to do that. So they
Exactly.
manage and lead the way they were managed and led. And unfortunately, I had one after another. So that
Yeah.
really was formative in terms of the early part of my career.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. We have Brett watching live.
Oh,
Been a
Brett.
year since we met. Love the book. Thank you, Brett, for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to meet Brett. So thanks for being here, Brett.
Yeah. So I always ask this, Todd, in just people explaining the background and kind of what they've done up to this point. What's piece of advice you've ever received?
Don't worry so much about what other people think. Take chances, take risks, fail, within reason. Sometimes I've taken jobs I thought I would love and I hated it. And a couple of jobs I took that I just needed the money or whatever, and I ended up loving it. So you just never know. Um,
Right.
I was offered a job when I moved back to New York after my 10 years in LA. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was offered a job by a major national leadership management training company. And even though I didn't have a background in management leadership, I was a manager and leader. So I took this job to help revamp their mini MBA program. But to do that, I had to work with all their management trainers and I had to read all these books. Those watching a video can see I have an extensive library. I've been reading an average of one business book a week since 1998. Hate to give away my age, but I am older than I look. So I read about 50 books a year. So I've read over 1,300, closing in on 1,400 management leadership, business communication related books over the last, years since I've been working. So again, I took that job, didn't think I would like it, and like the light bulb went off. My light bulb, I can't always keep my light bulb on my desk. The light bulb went off, and I realized that management leadership was an art and a science that you could learn, you could be coached in, you can be trained at, and you can get better at. And that's where that kind of like steered my career ever since. And that's why I do management leadership development. I teach leadership at NYU and Columbia. And I wrote this book, Visual Leadership, which incorporates my background from my English degree and my years in television and advertising and applies visual thinking principles to the practice of managing and leading. And I know we'll talk more about that shortly.
Absolutely. Wow, you've read a lot of books. I tell you,
Yeah,
that's that's
I
pretty
just,
impressive. I don't know if I've met somebody that has read that many books in that.
I try to read 52 a year. I'm up to 45, and I only have like a few weeks left. So I have a lot of reading to
Ooh,
do over
okay.
the last couple of weeks. So it's a
All right.
racing
Well, I
time.
won't take up all your day so that you can get back to reading.
Thank you. I may start reading while we're talking. So if that happens,
Hey,
just ignore. No,
there we go.
no, I won't do that.
So, no, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that. And for those that have not heard about your work or have, really heard you speak so far, hopefully they have all, just like me, been able to hear a little bit more. So, okay, Todd, the final thing before we dive into your topic, the power of visual thinking. This is something I started back when I first started this podcast, and now we're at episode, what are we, 54? So, envelope icebreaker game. This is 15 questions. I changed them up after the first year. And so if you want to think for a second about a number 1 through 15, and as I transition, just think of a number and then I'll take it and we'll see what it says here. Hold on one second.
Okay. Yeah, well, my
Okay.
favorite number is 8. So let's go with 8.
Favorite number 8. All right, there we go. Number 8. So, all right, Todd, what's your I wasn't expecting to love this moment in your career?
Oh, in my career, well, public speaking. I mean, I was
Yeah.
terrified of and terrible at public speaking for most of my life. As I mentioned, I'm an extreme introvert. So the idea of speaking in front of people was so terrifying to me. But I
Yeah.
was thrown into a few situations where I had to do it. And I learned that I wasn't as bad at it as I thought. I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would. And now I do it for a living. So that's
Yeah.
the big one.
There you go. Very cool. So how long have you been publicly speaking or doing more of it? When did that all start?
Yeah, well, I moved back to New York and I was floundering around and doing different jobs. And then I got laid off. And then 9/11 happened. And the city, I live in New York City. So the city was in kind of a depression. And I needed something just to get out of the house. So I took a Dale Carnegie public speaking course. And Warren Buffett is probably the most famous graduate. He attributes a lot of his success to that. And it gave me the skills and the confidence to get up in front of the room. And I had a great mentor. I'll give him a shout out, Joe Armentano, saw my potential as a speaker, and he trained me and mentored me and coached me. And again, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing what I do today. So I always
Cool.
remind him of that. So, but yeah, that's what launched. Yeah, taking a public speaking course is really what showed me that I had the capability and
Yeah.
potential to do that.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite place for pizza in your area in New York?
My favorite is actually the pizza place I grew up eating on Long Island, Emilio's. So,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of good
Okay.
pizza in New York City, but if I
Oh yeah.
sometimes when I get the craving, I say to my wife, "Let's just jump in the car and drive an hour out to Long Island and get my
Yeah.
favorite pizza in the world." So.
There you go. Very good. Well, if those watching have not watched before, um, my name is David Noe, the host, editor, producer of Speakeasy HR. There is full content out at speakeasyhr.com. I've been doing a weekly blog throughout the year, and we are on gratitude this week. So brand new blog if you go out to Speakeasy HR. Just a weekly reminder with one word, and I really hope people read that and try to apply it to their life. We're going through the holidays now, so offering gratitude and giving back where you can, I think, is super important and very fulfilling. So, so 1 minute of messages from our presenting sponsor, Payroll Partners, Todd, and then we're going to dive into your topic. So I'll see you here in 1 second here. 1 minute. Sorry.
Finding a new employee takes time and money. For one position on a single job board, you could easily spend a minimum of $5 to $10 a day advertising a job post. It's worth noting that the average time it takes to hire a new employee is 36 days. However, it can take longer than that. You could find yourself paying hundreds of dollars a month for a single job board. And if you're using multiple job boards for multiple positions, this could add up to thousands of dollars a month. There is a much simpler and more affordable way of finding the right candidate. At Payroll Partners, we offer an applicant tracking system to help manage your hiring process. Our ATS is customizable, allowing you to decide which days you want to run the job and when to close it so you don't break the bank. And this feature lets you e-blast your network, posting jobs on multiple boards at once, all managed in one location. Payroll Partners, elevating your payroll and HR experience.
So if you are in a role where you are looking at software solutions, technology for your company, and payroll is part of it, HR technology, and it's just not working for you what you have right now, look us up, check me out on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with you. We can work with anybody all over the country. So we are in the Midwest and Kentucky, but would love to connect with you if you are looking for better software and service for sure. So Todd, just like everybody else, when I connect with somebody, I really want to find the right topic based on somebody's background, interests, passions. And this one wasn't too hard for you, I don't think. It really is aligned with your writing in your book, Visual Leadership. I think this is definitely one of my favorite books I've gotten so far this year. And just reading it, I think there's so much packed into one book here. So if you are looking for a new book, we'll have a QR code to get this as well at the end of the show. But Todd, if you say visual thinking helps us, right? Say what you mean. What does that really look like in everyday communication and leadership?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for that shout out. I appreciate it. But just that's an example, right? You could have just mentioned the title, but you're physically holding it up makes all the difference in the world, right? So just again, we take in the world through all of our senses. There's an acronym called VARK: visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic. So those are not learning styles as they were originally labeled, but they are sensory modalities through which we take in information. So he's taken things through our eyes, through our ears, through reading and writing, and kinesthetic is about movement, feeling, and touch. So when you use all of those different approaches together, they help people to see what you're saying, right? So that's one of my mottos is how do you get people to see what you're saying? So that's what I coach people to do. That's what I teach in my courses. Because as a leader, when you ask people to say the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word leadership, vision tends to be the very first word, like more often than not, being a visionary. So what does it mean to have a vision? It's literally to see something, right? So as a leader, you have a picture in your mind's eye, which is not your physical eye, but your mind's eye. You have a picture of a future state that's different from and better than the current reality. So it's clear in your head, but how do you get that out of your head and into the heads of other people, right? So whether you're an HR person, a CEO, whatever, you have a picture of what you want something to look like. So if you've ever delegated to someone and they bring it back and you're like, that's not what I meant at all, that's not what I wanted, whose fault is that, right? People are not mind readers. So you didn't paint a picture of what you wanted that outcome to look like. So that's a big part of visual thinking is how do you get people, and that's what my book's about, my TED Talk. And when you use visual imagery or visual language as well. So it's not just pictures, it's not just drawings, but using metaphor, using storytelling, the ability to paint a picture with words, that's all part of communicating visually.
Yeah. So why do you think so many leaders struggle to get ideas out of their heads and into a form others can understand, you think?
Yeah, because again, we live in our own minds. No one else has your life experiences. If you use the metaphor of a mountain, right? As a leader, you're up at the top of the mountain. The other people are in the valley, right? They don't have your vantage point. They don't have access to information or power or resources that you do. So when you say, and here's a metaphor. Let's say you're an amazing basketball player like Michael Jordan, right now, and you just say that your players, when you're coaching them, oh, just do what I do, right? Or just see what I see. It's not so easy, right? You're coming from a different, you're seeing the world through a different lens. So part of your job as a leader is to help people see things through your lens. But I also have a concept called flipping the eye, which is about turning the mirror on yourself and saying, how am I being perceived? How are people looking at me as a leader? And also when you flip it back, how are my people seeing me? How are they seeing the world? How are they seeing their jobs? And can I see things through their lens with empathy and compassion and understanding? So like if I give my students 20 assignments, if I look at it through their lens, I might say that's too much, right? Maybe 3 assignments. So I used to give my students like 10 learning journals to write, and now it's down to like 3. So I'd rather have them do 3 good ones than race through 10. But from my perspective, 10 didn't seem like a lot when I first started teaching, but then when I realized it was a lot for them, because they're taking 3 or 4 other classes, right? So the ability to see things through their lens made me more empathetic and said, all right, let's meet halfway. Let's figure out a way that works for both of us, find a win-win. So again, as a leader, as a teacher, really in any capacity, customer service, you want to see things through the lens of your stakeholders.
Yeah. So you talk about 4 ways to visualize our thinking. Can you walk us through each one and when to use them?
Sure. I break it down to 4 categories: visual imagery, mental models and frameworks, metaphor and analogy, and storytelling and humor. Those are kind of like the 4 buckets. When used in combination, they're even more effective. But just by breaking them down to those categories helps you to wrap your head around it, right? Simplify the complexity. So category 1, visual imagery. You could sketch something out. You could do a napkin sketch. You can get up on a whiteboard. I was just at a workshop last week where they used a virtual whiteboard. They used a mural or Miro, one of those. So you had to create Post-its and move things around. That's much more visual and much more effective than if we were just talking about it, right? You could use props. For example, I have some things I keep on my desk. I have a Curious George doll that reminds me to always be curious, always ask why. My Gumby reminds me to always be flexible and bend over backwards to serve my clients. One of my clients recently, my executive coaching clients, was talking about, when I was at IBM in 1985, I said to him, it sounds like you're trying to impress people, but your people are just thinking this guy's a dinosaur, right? So I actually sent him a dinosaur to keep on his desk. So, and to stay current. So again, just having visual props like that. When I'm coaching people, I ask them, what do you need to stop doing, start doing, and continue doing? And this is a stress toy. I also use this as a giveaway with my clients. So there's just a few. They're fun, they're visual, they're creative, but they're also memorable. And in my TED Talk, I talk about attention, comprehension, and retention, right? When you use visual imagery or visual language, one, it captures people's attention and gets them to focus. Two, it helps them to understand. And three, it gets them to remember. Like if I asked you right now, what were the items I just held up? I'm sure you could rattle off Curious George, Gumby, etc., because you saw them, right? So if I just mentioned them, you might not have remembered anything I just showed you. But visually, our brains are just wired for visual. We are wired for story. So if you leverage that, you're going to be more effective when you're communicating with people.
I love that. I wish more people did that, and hopefully they will after watching this. Or
that's my mission. It's to get people to see things through a new lens and help others to see what you're saying. So if I am able to do that, then I've accomplished my mission.
Yep. So you kind of explained the next question that I had, but I'll ask it anyway in case you have something else. But what's an example of a moment in your career where visualizing an idea changed the direction of a project or conversation?
Yeah, I mentioned this in my TED Talk as well. When I was around 30 years old, I took a job as a project coordinator at a theme park production company, and they made me project manager, and I had to go to China, Shenzhen, China, to oversee the installation. I had no knowledge, no experience. I got there. Everyone there spoke Chinese. No one spoke English. We spoke no Chinese. And we started drawing and sketching and using hand gestures and pointing and facial expressions. And that was all nonverbal communications that help us. In fact, I keep this on my desk. This is a draft of the original napkin sketch. So if we needed a hammer or a tape measure or a screwdriver, we didn't know how to say it, but we were able to draw it and point to it. And then that's how we broke down those barriers. So that was a real life example of how when you're communicating across cultures, when you're communicating with language issues, see how you can leverage visuals or pictures or drawings or sketches, a schematic, a mind map, a storyboard. How can I get this down visually so that someone can understand me better? So that's all part of what we're trying to do here.
That's great. If you are watching live on LinkedIn or YouTube, throw a question in the chat if you have it. Would love to hear from you. So, Todd, for people who say they're not creative and they can't draw, what's your message to them about visual tools?
Yeah, even if you have what I call ICD, I can't draw syndrome, you could still do what I did. Use a prop, get someone else to draw it. And actually now there's no excuse, because now with AI, you can have AI draw things for you. So that's a whole thing that didn't even exist just a few years ago. So you could say to AI, draw this, give me a sketch, give me a map, give me turn this into some kind of visual.
Exactly.
Pictures from a magazine, enlist the help of someone who's more creative than you. Just like looking at your background, right? You have wild turkey, you have that phone there. It's speakeasy, so it reminds you of Prohibition. It reminds you of the 1920s, and right. So it's kind of like we all have different themes, and we have our personal brand. These are all different visual cues and clues that we pick up on that tell you something about a person or communicate a message subconsciously, right? So if you're more aware and more attuned to what other people are communicating, you could use a metaphor and analogy that resonates with them, right? So we talked about visual imagery. We can talk about metaphors. So if I'm talking to someone who likes baseball, I'll use a baseball analogy, right? But if I'm talking to someone from Europe, I might use not a football analogy, American football, but a European football or soccer analogy. So again, you want to speak the language of your stakeholders, and it does two things. One, they get you, and it also says to them, you get me, right? So if you speak someone else's language, it just creates this bond and this connection of understanding, and it helps to build teams. It helps to build collaboration. So again, if you're not aware or attuned to that, you're not going to do it. Now you can be more strategic and intentional in when you're doing, trying to communicate.
Yep, absolutely. This wild turkey is older than me, Todd. So it's considered vintage bourbon. So I guess I'm getting to the point of being vintage. I don't know.
You're vintage. Yeah, that's great.
It sounds better than old. I'm not old yet.
Yes. Well, someone said to me, they asked me about my book. I said, they said, is your book old or new? I said, have you read it yet? He said, no. I said, then it'll be new to you. Right?
There you go.
So again, instead of old, right, get rid of old. It's vintage or classic. Those are the two ways to label it.
That's right. So how can visual thinking, Todd, help leaders communicate more effectively, especially during conflict, change, uncertainty? What would you give them for advice there?
Yeah, when you use, sometimes things get heated or there's conflict or miscommunication. If you could find a metaphor to use, if you could find an analogy, and it doesn't always have to be sports. A lot of us gravitate to sports, but it could be
Yeah.
theater, it could be dance, it could be nature. Nature's universal, right? So if I say, let's plant the seed for some new ideas, let's get to the root of the problem, let's branch out in new directions, let's see which ideas bear fruit, right? Those are all tree or nature related metaphors that kind of reduce some of the tension, depersonalize things. And it doesn't matter. You may be picturing an oak tree while I'm picturing a pine tree. It doesn't matter. We both know what a tree looks like, right? So all of those metaphors. So that's what I would say is a good metaphor can help you connect and build and help to create understanding. A poorly chosen metaphor can actually backfire on you. It can alienate people if it doesn't resonate with them, right? So if you're a leader saying, I'm going to tell this great story about when I was at the yacht club the other day playing golf, all of a sudden you lost all the people because you're making, who are, that's not going to resonate with people. So you don't want to talk down to people, but you want to speak their language. When you use outdated, like with the dinosaur example, when you use outdated language, metaphors, and stories, it disconnects you from your audience. So you have to find out what are their interests, what do they understand, and what's going to resonate with them. So again, it's just about being more intentional, more aware, more strategic when you're trying to communicate with people from different cultures, different generations, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we have 5 generations working, so it's going to be a constant challenge for people who are managing, trying to lead, people that are not managers, right, that become a manager.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my NYU course, I teach leadership in the HR master's program, human capital management graduate program. And one of the exercises I do with my students is I have them get up to flip charts and come up with as much HR speak as you could possibly think of. All the jargon that we use, all the acronyms that we use. Now, if you're in finance, what are the acronyms and jargon of finance, of IT, of marketing? Because if you're trying to get funding for an HRIS system, if they don't know what technology doesn't know what that is, if finance doesn't know what that is, they're also thinking two things. Why should I care? And what's in it for me? Those are the two thought bubbles everyone has over their heads. So how are you going to sell IT and show them how this will integrate into current systems, or sell finance on the ROI of this investment if you can't translate the need for this to them? Right. So that's a big part of what I do is I help people to translate, just like speaking Spanish, English, or Chinese. How do you translate HR speak into the language of the business so that people can buy in and agree to and sign off on what you're trying to quote sell? Right. So that's a big thing that really resonates with a lot of my clients.
Oh yeah. Yep, we see that all the time. Try to talk to businesses and figure out what are they using. If they're using too many systems, and we can help simplify that, right? Like it's just people keep adding systems and they don't utilize them, and then it's just a big cluster.
That's
So we see it all the time.
Yeah.
So Todd, are there common visual habits or mistakes that you see leaders make that unintentionally confuse their teams?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, I think using a bad metaphor, telling a story that doesn't land, these are all skills that can be taught and learned, right? There are a million books. I have a whole shelf on the bottom here just on business storytelling, right? How do you tell a story? How do you communicate something? So I think that's a big thing, is just not speaking the language of your audience and things getting lost in translation. I think that's
Absolutely.
a key thing.
Yeah. Okay. So how can teams use visual thinking to collaborate better, especially, in the hybrid and remote environments today?
Yeah. Well, one is, as I mentioned, there are all these technology tools like virtual whiteboards and things like that. So I think when you're trying to build collaboration and cohesion, again, if you work on something together, I actually wrote an article for Inc. magazine a few years ago called "Can You Draw What Your Company Does?" Right? If you had to get up on a whiteboard and illustrate without saying a word what it is that you do and how you're better than the competition, what would you draw? Some people drew a process diagram or a map. Other people use metaphors and storytelling. But if you have a team work on that together, that will help you. And the story, the brief version of the story is one guy drew a picture of a whale eating all these goldfish. He said, we're the whale and our competitors are the goldfish and we're eating them all up. And someone said, that's a great picture you drew, but it's not true. It's more like our competitors are sharks and we're like dolphin. They just want to bite off business and leave the customers bleeding. We are like dolphin. We communicate. We are soft and cuddly. We are friendly. We're communicative. So the bad or the wrong metaphor of whale versus goldfish led to the shark versus dolphin analogy. And then it was like, all right, how can we be more dolphin-like? So all of a sudden, everyone was on board with that. In what ways are we like a dolphin when we're serving our clients? So that's a great example, a real-life example from a workshop I facilitated. And that took about a half hour to reach that point. They could have still been debating for months on how they're going to be, but the use of the metaphor and the fact that they collaborated to come up with something together unified them and gave them a common mascot, a common value system. So that's just one real life example of how using visuals in an exercise brought a team together.
Huh. Very cool. All right. So what's one simple visual technique people can try today to make their ideas clearer and more memorable?
Well, one is you could do the exercise I just mentioned. Think about yourself. I have a framework that I call similar to, different from, better than, right? So no matter what you do, like you're a payroll company, right? Payroll partners. There are other companies that do things similar to what you do, right? So what are some of the other companies? What would be the top 5 similar companies? Then I would say, David, how are you different? What's your competitive advantage? What makes you different? And how do those differentiators make you better for a particular customer? So if you could do that, so anyone on this call who watching this can say, here's what I do. Like the way I eventually came up with this framework, a friend of mine was writing a leadership book. And I said, that's great, because we need more leadership books. There are only 8 billion out there. But I said, what leadership books, because I've read most of them, what other books out there is your book similar to? Like if they were going to decide between your book and 5 others, what are those 5 others that are close? He told me. Then I said, all right, now how is yours different? Because if it's not different, we already have the other 5. Why do we need yours? He said, here's how mine is different. And I said, what makes it better? Not that it's the better book, but what makes it better for certain people that they're going to get more from this book that they won't get from the others. And that helped him for his proposal and pitching it. And he eventually got a book deal because he framed things in that way for both his agent and for the publisher. So same thing, whatever business you're in, think about what you're similar to, how you're different, and how you're better. That's a great exercise. And again, to do that, you have to actually visualize in your mind's eye, who are those competitors? What do we look like? What is our culture? What are the services and products we offer? So that's a really powerful exercise. And you can do it in about 20 minutes to a half hour, and it's incredibly productive.
Absolutely. So if someone wants to start building their visual thinking muscle today, obviously there's tons of books. Obviously your book is heavy, so you'll probably get some muscles by picking this up. So what other books, practices, tools do you recommend that they start with? Obviously your book obviously is one, but is there anything else that can help them just build that into their routine?
Sure. I mean, there's so many books. I mean, the people who have the greatest impact on me, and I list them in the back of my book as well as on my website. 1, watch my TED Talk. 2, check out my book. But the people who had the greatest impact on me were Nancy Duarte, who is like, to me, the queen of visual thinking. Her book Slideology, her book Resonate. She has her book Data Story on how to translate data into stories is amazing. She has a number of other books, but she had a tremendous impact on my thinking and on my career. Gar Reynolds, Garr Reynolds, American who worked at Apple for years, been living in Japan for years, applies Zen principles to the art of storytelling and visual design. He had his book Presentation Zen and The Naked Presenter. So there's so many out there. Dan Rome, who's like the king of napkins. He put napkin sketching on the map. His book Back of the Napkin is a classic. So if you just, those are just off the top of my head, 3 major authors who really had an impact on my thinking and my visual work. So there's a lot out there, but those are 3 of the big ones.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Todd. I wanted to bring this up for those obviously looking into purchasing Todd's book. You can find it on Amazon. The QR code is on the screen. So definitely, if you're looking for a new book for 2026 for yourself, or really anybody you work with that you think from a visual perspective and visual thinking and leadership could benefit from this. So, or even obviously somebody that isn't a leader right now and you think they have potential. So a lot of different people that could benefit from this book, and then your special, it's the downloaded visual leadership. It's the executive book summary. Is that right, Todd?
Yeah, it's done by Sound View Book Summaries, and they did a really nice job of writing an 8-page summary of the key themes and highlights. Some of them we talked about today, others we haven't. But yeah, so that's a free download of the PDF, and it'll give you a taste. I always say I keep this on my desk. Give you a Baskin Robbins little pink spoon taste of what visual leadership's all about, and then hopefully you'll buy the whole cone or the gallon. So yeah, that'll give you a taste of what my work's all about.
That's awesome. Well, good. No, that's great. I really appreciate that. And anything new that you're working on for next year? I know you're obviously doing a lot of executive coaching with Big Blue Gumball. So what's on the horizon for Big Blue Gumball?
Yeah, I do every year in March. I do a leadership program for people who run trading desks, Wall Street companies from all over the world. So that this will be I co-facilitate that with a guy named Jeff Schwartzman, the head of Chief Learning Officer of a company called LiquidNet. And this will be it's our 21st time running this program over the last 18 years. So it's great that they keep having us back, which is amazing. And then I teach at NYU. So my next class starts in January. And I also teach at Columbia. I teach a very different type of class. It's visual leadership, but it's leadership for Broadway stage managers in their MFA theater program. So as opposed to the HR and marketing type students I have at NYU, this is a very different type of audience. But the bottom line is, no matter what you do for a living, you have to get people to see what you're saying. So if you're a stage manager, think about it on Broadway. You have to deal with cast and crew and major stars and the director and the producers and the lighting people and the sound people. You could be technically proficient, but if you can't communicate effectively, if you can't have impact and influence, you're not going to be successful. So we very often forget about the soft skills side of things, for lack of a better term, the ability to communicate. I call it CAP, putting your cap on. CAP stands for confidence, assertiveness, and presence, right? If you don't have confidence in what you're doing, if you can't assert yourself when you need to, and you don't have executive presence, you're not going to be effective or successful. So everything I do, whether it's through my teaching, my coaching, or my training programs, and a lot of team building workshops coming up, again, it's all using my visual leadership approaches to help you achieve those objectives.
That's great. You got a lot going on, Todd.
A lot of reading to do over the next 3 weeks. So
yeah, you got a lot of reading to do. So I will not keep you from that. And I really appreciate your time to come on and share your knowledge and share a little bit about your amazing book that you have, Visual Leadership. So again, for those of you looking for a new book, check this out on Amazon in the QR codes, and certainly connect with Todd if you don't currently connect with him on LinkedIn. But Todd, appreciate all your time today. I wish you the best, and let's keep in touch. If I get out to New York, I might ask you for some suggestions for food, pizza, plays, whatever.
I'm a volunteer for Big Apple Greeter, so I'm happy to show you around and give you a special VIP tour of the Big Apple when you come here. So
there we go. Well, great. Well, have a nice holiday season, Todd, and hopefully we'll talk again soon. But wish you all the best, and thanks everybody for watching today. Enjoy your day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.
All right, take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. And remember, champions adjust, y'all. Champions adjust. See you later.